Hi everybody. In this video, we're going to learn about the quadratic formula, one of the first steps to the quadratic formula actually. In particular, we're going to be learning about the discriminant, which is the stuff that's under the radical right here. This stuff. That's what we call the discriminant. Okay? That's what we call the discriminant. So we have cases, and let's talk about the cases that we need to analyze. And this is how we would determine the nature, you see the word nature here, of the roots. All right, so if we work out the problem, right, b squared minus 4ac, we are going to identify, first of all, what is a, what is b, what is c. So that's the first step, right? Step one is to identify a, b, and c. After you identify A, B, and C, we're going to evaluate, right? Evaluate the expression B squared minus 4AC. And when we do that, a couple of things are going to happen. Sometimes the number is going to turn out to be negative. When it turns out to be negative, those are called imaginary roots, right? That negative meaning less than 0. Those are called imaginary roots. Okay. Now we learned about imaginary numbers recently, right? So we know imaginary roots means that it's going to have the letter I in the answer. It's going to have the letter I because we're taking the square root of a negative number. All right. So that's the square root of a negative number. Therefore, our answer, part of our answer is going to have an imaginary part, which is I. Okay, it's going to be a part of the answer. So let me say this will be part of the answer. Okay, next. Sometimes the number is going to turn out to be 0. Okay, in the case where it's equal to 0, there are real roots. And it's actually only one real root. Okay, and in this case, we call it repeated. Okay, it's repeated, meaning it happens twice. It's like a bounce off the x-axis. Okay, so it is one solution, one real solution. Okay, and like we just said, it is repeated, so it happens twice. Next, sometimes the number comes out to be a positive square, perfect square, a positive perfect square number. So it's positive and it's a perfect square. And in that case, you turn out to have two real rational roots. Two real rational roots or solutions. Meaning the number is going to be like a whole number or a fraction, but it's going to be a fraction that you can write or a whole number, right? Finally, if the number is greater than 0, but it's not a perfect square, not a perfect square, right? Not is big here because it's not a perfect square. That means that we're going to have two real roots, but the roots are going to be irrational, meaning we're not going to be able to simplify it. It's going to be two real irrational solutions. And so that's how we are going to determine our answers. Now, this last one just simply says, hey, if it's positive, that means it's a real root. We already knew that because we said that here. Real root, positive number, real root, positive number, right? We already said that same thing here, okay? All right, so let's go on to some examples. Remember, our job is to identify A, B, and C. So A is going to be the quadratic term, so that's A is -9. B is going to be the linear term, so that's -3. And C is going to be the constant term, so that's a +9. And now I'm going to evaluate the expression for b squared minus 4ac. Everywhere I see a b, I'm going to plug in a number -3 squared minus 4 times a. A is -9, and c is +9. And now I'm going to use the order of operations to work out this problem. -3 squared is a +9, right? Because -3 times -3 is +9. Minus, I'm going to go ahead and multiply these three numbers here, right? So -4 times -9 times 9. Let's go ahead and work that out. So if you can actually plug this into decimals and let it do the work for you, we have -3 squared minus 4 times 9, -9 times 9. That gives us 333. I wanted to know what this part was, right? So the -4, the 4 times -9, right? You see why I went ahead and typed it without you guys, because my keyboard just keeps popping up. So that gave me -324, right? And so 9, which so that, remember, then that's the 4 is negative, right? So -4 times -324 gives you a +324, and +324 plus 9 gives you 333. All right, so let's get back to it. So this turns out to be a positive, right? So a negative, actually 324, right? This and this is actually going to create a positive situation, and we talked about that before. So that's going to give me 9 plus 324, which gives me 333. Now, let's look at this number. This number is not a perfect square, okay? It is positive, but it's not a perfect square. So because it's positive, all right, we already know that there are two real solutions because it's positive. There are two real solutions. Now, the question is it rational or irrational? Well, in our case, because it is not a perfect square, it is definitely going to be irrational. So 333 is what we put here, and then we say two solutions. But the nature of our solutions is actually two real solutions that are irrational. All right, now let's go ahead and get to the other example. Again, we're going to identify A, B, and C. So A is 9, B is 4, and C is 2. We're going to evaluate the expression b squared minus 4ac, all right, by plugging in the numbers. B is 4, A is 2, and C is 9. This is a little bit easier to work out than the last one was. So 4 squared is 16, minus 4 times 2, which is 8, and 8 times 9 is 72. So 16 minus 72. All right, so 16 minus 72 actually gives us -56. So now let's take this number and go back and analyze what we did. So our answer is -56, which means the nature of our solution, right? So if this comes out to be negative, that means there is no real solution, because it's negative, okay? Also, we know that our solution is actually a complex number. It's going to be imaginary. So there's going to be two imaginary solutions. And that's how you use discriminant to determine the answer. Now, let me go a step further. I want to make something really, really clear. All right. So we only talked about the math, but we didn't talk about how this connects to the picture. So let's scroll back up, okay? And let's talk about how these connect to our picture of our parabola. So if we had a parabola, let me tell you what will be happening here for each of these situations. In the case of b squared minus 4ac is equal to 0, if we graph the parabola, okay, Remember I said it has one solution? That means it's going to bounce off the x-axis and come back. Okay? That's what happens. And so the vertex is actually on the x-axis for in the case of b squared minus 4ac is equal to 0. Okay? Now let's go to the next one. In this situation, we have two real roots. And so, and actually in both of these situations, this is what's going to happen. Okay, the graph is going to cross the x-axis twice. Okay, it's going to cross the x-axis twice. And so it's going to have two real roots. The question is it rational or irrational? That's what we'll have to figure it out. Okay, now for this picture, for this graph down here, and this is going to be our last one, it's where b is less than 0. Well, when b is less than 0, that means the graph doesn't cross the x-axis at all. It's up here somewhere. The vertex is nowhere near the x-axis. It's like right there. Okay? And remember, this last one right here is just talking about positive, and that is the same as this situation here. We talked about that earlier. So that's what the graph looks like. Okay? That's how you know what your solution is going to be. So you can tell from the graph whether your b squared minus 4ac is equal to 0. You could tell from looking at the graph whether our b squared minus 4ac is greater than 0. You can also tell whether it's less than 0 just by looking at the graph with your eyeballs. All right, thank you for your time. Watch out for the next video.